Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Osamu Tezuka's Wonder 3. Now before I actually start reviewing Wonder 3, I want to share my experience of actually acquiring this manga. So if you're familiar with how Osamu Tezuka manga have been released in English in the past, you'll know that a company called Digital Manga Publishing ran several Kickstarters in order to release Osamu Tezuka titles. And as of this video, Wonder 3 is the most recent campaign that they ran in order to release Osamu Tezuka manga. This was back in 2017, and I distinctly remember pledging for it, as well as a wide variety of other Osamu Tezuka manga that was going to be released as well. And over time, we got a little bit of communication, but not much, and eventually it actually culminated in all of the other manga besides Wonder 3 getting cancelled. To be fair, we did get a refund, so that was good, but it wasn't until last year that I actually got my hands on Wonder 3 for the first time. That was 4 years after the Kickstarter campaign, so as you can imagine, actually getting Wonder 3 was a bit of a frustrating and confusing situation. But having actually got Wonder 3 and read it, the question is, as always, is Wonder 3 any good? And that's what I'm going to be discussing today. So let's get started. So what is the story of Wonder 3? Wonder 3 opens up at the Milky Way League, which consists of aliens throughout the entirety of the Milky Way. And having seen the horrors, the wars, the conflicts, the violence that's taking place on Earth, they're having a debate and a vote on whether or not they should try to save the Earth or destroy it. After the vote ends up being tied, they decide instead to send 3 agents to Earth and decide whether Earth is worth saving or if it should be destroyed. That's when we're introduced to these 3 agents, Pucko, Bako, and Nako. These agents are given an anti-proton bomb, and they're told that if they decide that the Earth isn't worth saving, that they should use the anti-proton bomb to blow it up. After reaching Earth, they decide that they need to go into disguise. And so they kidnap a couple of animals, a duck, a bunny, and a horse, and end up using them to disguise themselves. And after a series of troubles and mishaps, they eventually end up living with a very troubled young boy called Shinichi Hoshi. And that's how the story begins. Now, with regards to the actual story itself, it is in many ways very enjoyable. There's a lot of great humor in it. It also, of course, has a lot to say about the acts of conflict taking place on Earth, which I actually think is very appropriate to this particular time. And the cast of characters, while not super deep, are quite enjoyable in their own way. One aspect of Wonder 3 that I did find a little bit on the frustrating side though, was that Osamu Tezuka would go into these story arcs that sometimes would leave the characters of the Wonder 3 out for a very long period of time. And even though the story that was taking place is very much connected and is not superfluous in any way, I couldn't help getting this sense of a disconnect between what was happening and the Wonder 3 characters themselves. So I was a little bit frustrated at that. But one area that I want to bring up, and this really surprised me actually, was the ending of this manga. So I kind of suspected, I had an idea, I think it'll end this way based on how the story is set up. But when I actually reached the ending, it's actually a very surprising twist. Something that I was not expecting, something that I thought was quite clever. While I'm sure some people might be frustrated at the fact that the twist at the end hasn't really been built up to in any way, I still thought it was actually surprisingly clever, and something that when I go back to reread Wonder 3, I think will actually give me a very different view on the events of the story. With regards to the characters themselves, now the Wonder 3 themselves are for the most part pretty simple characters. They're not particularly deep in any way. Of the 3, the one that definitely has the most personality is Pucko. Pucko from the very beginning is very staunchly anti-Earth and is very much in the mood of destroying the planet. He also butts heads a lot with his companions. Bako is the leader of the group and is the one that quite often has to make the tough decisions. And in many ways she is very staunchly pro-Earth. She thinks that humanity has a lot to offer and deserves a chance to live. And when it comes to Nako, Nako is very talented at creating things out of any piece of junk, incredible pieces of technology. But in terms of personality, he is definitely the weakest of the 3, not really offering too much on his own, and quite often just following the orders of either Pucko or Bako, whichever one is trying to use him. Now the character that I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be very mixed on, but in fact I actually found to be surprisingly relatable, is the character of Shinichi. Shinichi is a very troubled young boy who sees a lot of corruption, who sees a lot of bad things in his village, things that shouldn't be the way they are, but they are. And his response is to resort to violence in order to try to correct these misdeeds. But of course that leads into ever greater trouble. And while I'm sure some people will view Shinichi as being quite annoying, I actually see a bit of myself in Shinichi. Not the violence, I want to clarify that, but being very frustrated at how the world is, observing the world, seeing that things are done certain ways, thinking that that's terrible, or that's corrupt, or that's horrible, etc., etc., and being unable to do anything about it. He very much reminds me of my childhood from that perspective, and so I ended up actually becoming very invested in him as a character. Now, with regards to the artwork, now I think it's important to note that Wonder 3 was done during the mid-1960s. So if you're trying to figure out where this is in the evolution of Osamu Tezuka's art style, you should be very much thinking about the 1960s component of it, because this is very much representative of his 1960s works. At this point, he's developed his art style quite a bit to incorporate a lot of detail. The characters themselves are very appropriately cartoony looking, and I would say very pleasantly designed. In particular, I was always admiring how much emotion he got out of the Wonder 3 themselves in their animal forms. While not quite as detailed as his 70s and 80s works, I still think Wonder 3 has a very pleasant artistic aesthetic and is a great representative of the type of work that Osamu Tezuka was doing in the 1960s. Now, with regards to how this manga is presented, there isn't too much to say compared to many other digital manga publishing releases of Osamu Tezuka manga. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with those releases, I'll quickly run through it. So first off, you will see that if I compare it to my trusty Yotsuba, that it is bigger than your standard tankobon size, which is always something that I consider to be a plus. Besides that, the paper quality is quite nice. It contrasts the black and white artwork very well. And while this shouldn't have to be mentioned, I do want to emphasize this since there was a period of time that digital manga publishing were releasing Osamu Tezuka manga and this aspect was missing, and that is page numbering. So of course I'm very happy to see that included. And then when it comes to extras, there isn't too much to speak about, but there is a little bit worth mentioning. At the very beginning, we do get a little statement from Hikaru Sasahara, who is the head of digital manga publishing, just giving a quick statement about Wonder 3, how he sees a lot of Wonder 3 in the movie Lilo and Stitch, which I kind of get as well, but it's a very short statement, nothing too much there. The aspect I actually found quite interesting myself is the afterword from Osamu Tezuka. Now, I'm quite used to Osamu Tezuka afterwards being pretty short, being about maybe a paragraph long, but Osamu Tezuka actually devotes about 2 pages to his afterword, which is actually considerably more meaty than normal, and actually contains a lot of very interesting information, in particular the fact that the anime adaptation of Wonder 3 was quite resoundingly beaten by a show called Ultra Q, which eventually created the Ultraman franchise. So that is very interesting information to have. But then beyond that, there isn't too many other extras. So overall, I would say that it's actually quite well presented by digital manga publishing. They did a pretty good job releasing this manga, and I don't have too many criticisms of it. So in conclusion, what are my thoughts on Wonder 3? Wonder 3 is a very interesting and in many ways very enjoyable manga. It has a very interesting premise which allows a lot of very interesting commentary about the state of humanity. And while I found the actual Wonder 3 characters themselves to be a little simplistic for my liking in terms of their personality, I did find myself really invested in Shinichi. The artwork is pleasant in the very 1960s way, and digital manga publishing themselves did a very good job of releasing this manga. So if you're an Osamu Tezuka fan, this is definitely something that you must pick up. And for those of you who are looking for an interesting sci-fi story with commentary about humanity and how it must improve, as well as some very nice comedy and some very enjoyable adventure, then I would also quite recommend you pick up Wonder 3. I think it's a very solid read from Osamu Tezuka. So that was my review of Wonder 3. Of course, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on Wonder 3. Have you read Wonder 3? If you have, did you like it? Did you dislike it? What are your thoughts on the story itself, how it handled all of the commentary on humanity, on the characters themselves, its place within the Osamu Tezuka catalogue, and of course if you have any additional information about Wonder 3, about Osamu Tezuka, about digital manga publishing, please leave them in the comments below. And of course, if you want to support the channel, I would encourage you to use my Amazon or Right Stuff affiliate links in the description below, When you purchase an anime and manga through those affiliate links, not only supporting me, not only supporting the channel, but you're also supporting the anime and manga industry. So I'd highly encourage you to purchase your anime and manga through those affiliate links. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye bye.